So we're good. Evening, everybody. Now, should I begin with apologies? The plan was to have a Dane and a Finn and a Swede talking about the lists and sharing their experiences of their time in their respective armed forces. We don't know what's happened to our Dane. He's not here, and we're texting him to see where he is. But I'm just going to introduce Ludi and Frederick, and I'm going to let them start talking, and then I'm going to text Christian some more. And then I promise that I won't speak very much. Actually, that's probably a bit of a big promise for me, isn't it? I promise I won't speak too much. And I'll keep an eye on the questions if any questions are coming in. Everybody hopefully knows what we're talking about. We're talking about the new Nordics book that's gone out. I mean, we trailed it a little bit in the last chat. I think Ludi and I were having that conversation about, I was quite shocked to find the Finns had changed sides from how I remember them being when I was growing up during the Cold War, playing moderns. But they're all NATO armies, and I suppose what I should do is throw over to Luda and say, do you want to get started? And I'll monitor the chat and the chat here, and I'll see if I can get hold of Christian from wherever it is that he's wandered off to. So over to you guys.
Yeah. All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Richard. Hey guys, welcome back to the Breakthrough Assault channel. As Richard said, we're going to be talking about the new Nordic Forces book that's coming out, and with us today we've got Frederick, a good fellow player from Sweden. Frederick, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Frederick Gustafsson, and I'm happy to be here on the Breakthrough channel and being invited to discuss the Nordic Forces book. I'm the owner of Gustafsson Spel. So I've been training Flames of War and Team Yankee for a couple of years now, but I've also been playing for for 15 years or something like that. So it's good to get more involved in the game.
Yeah, and finally we get our own forces into Team Yankee as well. I know that the communities in both countries have been working on community lists for some time, and now they've finally become official, which is awesome.
Yes.
Yeah, so as we as Richard kind of tipped you guys off, the idea was to have guys with an active service background explaining the forces and giving their thoughts. Frederick, just a quick summary. What did you do in Swedish Armed Forces? Don't go into any details. Let's not break any OPSEC. But in addition to owning a gaming store, you used to wear your M90s.
Yes, it was what is it now? 12 years ago. That I was in the military with the Nordic Battle Force, and then written over to be a full-time soldier, one of the first. But I didn't stay so long. But I was in logistics shorthand.
So one of the most essential branches, since without logistics nothing would work. Even though
the main cogwheel to make it all run.
Yeah. And quickly about my background. I was in for about a total of 5 years in the Finnish Armed Forces, served with the Navy and the Army, although in the Navy, I was never on a ship. I was in the naval infantry, and been
or
doing
Marines, as we would call them.
Yeah, did different things in the service. So, Frederick, since you're the guest, I was thinking maybe you would like to start off with the Swedish forces. I know you haven't had that much time to look at them since the NDA just lifted from us.
Yeah.
But what are your first? Let's before going into details on the units. What are your thoughts on the Swedes at the moment? Did they meet your expectations? What I found interesting is that the Nordic forces can actually take integrated formation support from other nations, which is pretty cool because that's most likely what would have happened anyway.
Yeah.
Since even though, yes, this was a massive shock for Richard that the Finnish army didn't consider staying on the Warsaw Pact side, but the Finnish armies never expected an attack from the west for some weird reason. Of course, there's been. I assume there's been plans if somebody would land on the southwestern coast, but we weren't really expecting for it to be at least not the Swedes, and most likely not the Danes either. It would be even further away. And most of the major exercises, for some weird reason, until last year, we weren't allowed to openly say who the enemy is. But they always came from the east, and they were known as Enemy Yellow A2.
So I'm assuming it wasn't the Mongols then.
I mean, technically could have been a few Mongols with them.
And you never know with the Swedes, they could just be coming to take back what's rightfully theirs, from 1809.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wonder how that would have gone. But
no, it's like when we did our exercises with it's always looking to the east, and all the target practices are like look Russian.
I've got no idea why.
No.
But hey, yeah, Frederick, your thoughts on the Swedish force?
It's a very good, very nice to have a look at it and to get it, because Sweden had and still have majorly their own equipment. So I believe all, when I looked at the list with what's coming, it's all new stuff. Surely it's supposed to be play out in 85, and most of the equipment is outdated there. But we got new equipment like 1995, so 2000. But overall, I think they're gonna be fun to try and play. Really.
What kind of a force are you thinking about? We've privately discussed this a few times already, but what are you going to start off with?
All. I will probably do a mechanized army supported by the 104s.
Cool.
Try to. It will be likely more to my gameplay, as I like to play aggressive. And with the S tank, they're more a defensive unit in the game.
Yeah, definitely. The new ambush tank rule seems pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Basically hit me on a 6.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is going to turn into a bit of a Finnish and Swedish loving, I think, because I've just spent quite a lot of money from a backdated pay award on my pre-ordering my Swedes. So
Richard,
I've gone again.
Yeah, Richard, what's your plan with the Swedes, since you're making a Swedish force?
I've managed to. I'd hung on to some old Centurions from Fate of a Nation. I started Jordanians, and then just nobody played. And I sold most of it off, and I thought, well, I'll just hang on to the Centurions. That's my favorite tank, British tank, I think, either that or the Crusader. And they've sat in very badly undercoated yellow for about 10, 12 years. So I'm going with some, I bought some S tanks. I mean, you can't have a Swedish army without S tanks, right? So I'm going to look at maybe a mech force like Frederick, but to have the interchangeable tanks, or if I go completely crazy, it might be S tanks with an infantry platoon and Centurions with an infantry platoon. And I found some old Vigan kits. Before everybody knew Vigans were going to be in, obviously we get a little bit of an advanced look. So I managed to find a couple of cheap Vigan kits on eBay, but I don't know how many of those will be left now. So yeah, that was my plan, and I'll probably buy a couple of boxes of finished stuff just to add in to the endless amounts of T-72s that I have for others. And I suspect what might happen is that although the camo scheme is slightly different between the Centurions in the Swedish army and the Centurions in the Danish army, I may well pick up some figures just to add some Danes in. And probably the Danish Land Rover or the Danish Mercedes Jeep unit, because that's Soren's unit, so we can all shoot Soren when he's on the table. You know, we asked him when we were over in Finland what he did. He said, "I just used to drive around in a Jeep." So yeah, that'll be him. So I'm really looking forward to it. I'm not sure where I'm going to put it in the house, but I think it's quite an interesting army. And like Frederick says, it's all new. So, you know, yes. new armored personnel carriers, the little 90mm or ATGW armed Jeep things.
Yeah, that's one of the
he's here.
Reasons why I'm doing the mech.
Yeah.
Because they can only
I bought a box of the IKV 91s as well, and they're not brilliant, but again, they're just to have some stuff that's different.
Hey, Christian, welcome on the line.
Joined by Mr. Lingvald.
Yes.
So, Christian, do you want to, if you can hear us? He's just connecting. He can't hear us.
He's connecting the audio.
Yeah, he's got his thumb up, right. So, we're just chatting through. We haven't been going long, mate. Do you want to, without going into too much detail, do you want to give us a quick background on your time in the Danish army and where you what you did and who you served with?
Christian, can you hear us?
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yes.
Now we can hear you.
Yes.
Okay.
Just so you know, Christian, you're on live.
Yeah, we're on live, mate.
Okay. I had some issues with the connection and the thingy.
That's okay. So we were just talking about the Swedes, but we're glad that you're here, because otherwise it was just going to be we were just going to end up talking about Sweden and Finland. So Christian, do you want to just because it's your first time on Breakthrough Assault, do you want to just tell us a little bit about yourself and what you did in the Danish army?
Yes. Well, yeah. I hope the audio is okay. I was in the armed forces for 15 years. Even though I have such a baby face, I'm 36, but
still a child.
Yeah, I joined up, and the thing is, I think it's the same in Sweden as in Finland and Denmark. We have conscription, so when you turn 18, you're obliged to go, and then if you don't want to serve, you can serve in civil defense, and if you are like a non-military supporter, then you'll have to do some kind of community work instead, like work at the public library in your conscription period. And the plan was actually for me to just do my conscription period and then go back to school and stuff. But I found out that the camaraderie and the way the army worked really suited me, so I joined up and did my first tour in 2007 to the Balkans, and then I signed a professional contract and became medic or corpsman, and served my first tour as an armored infantry medic in my platoon. And then after that, I switched to light reconnaissance, where we were a 16-man team, where I was one of the 2 team medics. And we did a tour in Afghanistan in Helmand province, where we worked together with a lot of British guys and US guys. And then when I got back, my unit closed down due to reforms, because they wanted to move all the reconnaissance assets to one certain regiment. So I was either gonna go to become a tanker or go back to the infantry. And I was like, okay, tanks sounds cool, but the fact that you are at a garrison where there are tanks each day, you know how much time they spend on just maintaining the vehicles and doing all kinds of stuff other than drilling. So I got back to the armored infantry and served there for 4 years. And the last 3 years of those, I was the quartermaster of the COI. And then due to the way my contract works is that for each month I served, I earned up 1 week of civilian education with military pay. So I started to become a registered nurse, and now I work at a hospital on the surgical ward as a surgical nurse. And 1.5 years from now, I have enough experience to apply to become a nurse in the army, which is my plan. And gaming-wise,
so everybody knows Christian's mad enough to go back.
Yeah. I've been playing tabletop games, war games, since I was 14. Started like most guys, with exception of Richard, started with playing Warhammer and Warhammer Fantasy. And then after my time in the army, I was more keen on playing like historical war games, like with real military assets and the way it works. So I've been playing Flames of War for 10 years now, I think 11 years. And I've been part of the Danish ETC team, which is this big event, team tournament each year. I've been part of that team for 9 years now. And I consider myself as both a narrative player, casual gamer, if that is the setup, but also a very competitive player if that's needed of me. That's me.
Cool. Well, we just had Frederick tell us about his thoughts of the Swedish force in the book. I know you as well, Christian, had very little time to familiarize yourself with the contents of the new book. What are your thoughts, and what are you going to start with?
One thing the centurions are in there, right? As I recall, yes. And the first thing that sprung to my mind was when I was in the army, some of the old guys, some of the old tankers had driven in centurions back in the 80s. And they actually told me that when they went on exercises for 14 days or something like that, the centurion isn't with an automatic gear, it's manual. And you had to apply 25 kilos of pressure on the clutch to switch gears. So he always wore like a knee band because it was so hard for him to drive. So something I think they could have like added in with the centurion is that it's a manual gearbox. So there might be some issues with cross tests and stuff like that, because when you're a driver and you've been driving for 10 hours straight, your knee is really worn out.
So you've got to remember the Centurion's older than me.
Yeah. So that they first were deployed in Israel, right? Like they used them in the Golden Heights and stuff like that. And
so there were Centurion ones on a flatbed truck on their way to Germany in 1945.
Okay, yeah.
So
but
it's the next step up from the Comet, and it never saw combat.
As I recall, they used them like with like real efficiency in the Arabic Wars. I think the Israelis used them, but otherwise the way they fitted out like the Danish army is basically during the Cold War we had like hand-picked equipment, from both the US and the German armor industry, and then also some Swedish stuff, of course, like the Carl Gustaf and things like that. But I think that the way they portray the Danes are quite decent. You know, it was for many years we had obviously a conscripted army, and then you were obliged to serve until you were like, or could be called upon until you were 50. So the way they, you know, set the skill level and the morale of the troops is decent, I think. But one thing I would have wished they would have done was the way we had these heavy armored reconnaissance battalions that consisted of a mix of tanks, armored infantry, scouts, and mortars, like in one formation. Could have been nice if they had added that in. But
I think
otherwise,
the way they split them up isn't they've made the Jutland units with Leos and then the Zealand units with Centurions. So I don't know if that's historically accurate, but that seems to be the way they've divided up the formations for the narrative bit.
The way they actually wanted to use them was like all the regiments near Copenhagen on Zealand, they were supposed to drive to something called Køge Bugt, the Bay of Køge, where they anticipated that the Russians obviously would try and
next war, Christian.
What?
So the next war, not the last one.
Obviously would have tried to assault us, and then the Jutland division's job was to go down to Lübeck in Germany and support the British elements and US elements there near the DDR border. But Denmark had like a really strategic importance during the Cold War, and that's also the reason why I think that in the spring of 45 the British rushed to occupy us, because of the straits near Sweden and also between the two islands, Zealand and Fyn, were very vital. For instance, the Danes were the ones that spotted the missiles heading for Cuba first, near the fortress on Langeland, which is this big island near the Straits of Denmark, and actually told that information to the US government. So the Danes, and the plan for us, as I was told by the old officers at work, was that we were supposed to hold out for 3 days until relieved. But when you look at the old Warsaw documents that have been, revealed nowadays, they were just gonna nuke us and then sail straight through Denmark. So some tactical nukes on Copenhagen and Roskilde, and these guys would have been, put out of action. So mainly, I think the Jutland division was the ones that were really going to, help out defend the German border, because otherwise they would just been able to sail straight through. But
do you want to talk us through the Finnish stuff? I know you're quite upset that you haven't got your Finnish produced wheeled armored personnel carrier that you were clambering around in parallel when we were there in March.
Quickly before we go into the Finnish force, Christian, do you have any plans on doing a Danish force or some other Nordic force?
Well, I'm very Anglophile, and so I haven't gotten into Team Yankee, even though there's a lot of Danes playing it. But I rather want a British force, because the Danish forums are just going nuts. And then if you go to tournaments, everybody will have a Danish army, and it's like, okay. No, so I don't have any feelings towards want to create my own Danish army. But I know a lot of guys have already, before this book has been released, made their own adaptation of the Danish army with the stuff that is already out there. So a lot of Danes are plugged in and ready to play already, due to the fact there have been some unofficial lists released. Danish guide put a lot of effort into to creating the Danish army. And I actually think, I don't know, I'm not sure whether the Battlefront or the guys making Team Yankee have reached out for him, but maybe they've used him as a liaison, because he had really done his his research.
Yeah. So I do know that. Well, I mean, it's the fact that most Nordic communities had their own unofficial lists created already, and I know well, actually, we've all met the guy from the Finnish community who built the Finnish lists, and from what I understood, he did help out with creating the Finnish forces. So I wouldn't be surprised if the same would have happened with Sweden and Denmark. I've got no idea about Norway, since I mean the Nordic gaming communities are usually pretty tight, but I don't think anybody knows any Norwegians that play any war games. And I know Frederick's told us that people do buy his miniatures from Norway.
Yeah, and I've spoken to one guy, and they were like 4 guys in, I think, Bergen or something like that, Norwich. So it was like a little town very north in Norway. But they're hard to find them.
Bit of a drive from Oslo up to Narvik to play, isn't it?
Yeah.
So if any of the Norwegian players are watching this or listening to this, get in touch with any of us. We really want to do something with the Norwegians as well. But we've rambled on about the other countries, so maybe get to the Finnish force. Seems like the Finns became the Nordic IDF, so everything morale-wise seems to be a 3+, skill-wise seems to be a 3+, and assault a 4+, which is pretty convincing. I am quite surprised that we became so good. Equipment wise, yes, in 83, 85, most of the equipment was from the Warsaw Pact, bought through the Soviet Union, and especially in the 90s when the DDR was dismantled, Finland bought a ton of equipment from the DDR, since our stocks were full, and basically if you bought one tank, they would give you 3 tanks on top of that, and here, take a huge container of assault rifles and whatever else you need. So, but as Richard already hinted, most of us Finns had this small issue that the XA-180, or so-called Pasi, armored personnel carrier, wasn't in the book, which we were really hoping for, especially since I know that Sweden used it, still uses it. Christian, I think even you guys use some variants.
We had when I started in the army, we had the CISO.
Exactly.
We had that one.
The same vehicle,
used in Iraq, and
and I know for a fact that the Norwegians use it, so that would have been one cool pan-Nordic kit. Although I've heard rumors that there might be some guy in the woods north of me creating those in that scale right now. Can't say any more. They're rumors. But stay tuned.
It doesn't narrow it down, does it? In the woods north of you, given that your entire country is covered in woods.
I mean, makes it easier for me too. But that would have been a cool addition. But otherwise, it looks pretty good. I like the Finns modified heavily. The tanks, you've got the FM1s. Sorry?
What's the special rule of the Finns? I can't remember in the game.
I need to look it up. I can't remember if there was any special rule per se. But for example, the T series tanks have the FM, so Finnish modification 1 and 2. So we've got thermal optics and other stuff. The T55s. I've never worked with the T72s since when I did my military service and then later stayed on. We'd already switched to Leo 2s. There was in 2010 there were still some T72s in use, but I have done a ton of training around T55s since my first unit had old T55s littered around the training grounds, basically with, I don't know why, but they were all painted up, and okay, you could go inside them, and some of them, and they were basically ready to go, but I don't think they would have fired up after being in the middle of the forest for 30 years.
No.
But yeah, it's the T55 seems to be a tank that you can, if you go to any Finnish army base, there's some T55 hidden in some corner of that base. And then so basically the Richard, has there do we have any questions, by the way, so far?
So there's a couple of things coming through. So we have a Finnish colleague on. I am not going to try and pronounce that name, I'm afraid, because I'll just make a complete balls up of it. Who I think he's the guy that was involved in doing the Finnish lists before Battlefront got hold, and has worked with.
Yes, it's Antti.
Antti,
hey, buddy.
Okay. Yeah, he's saying they tried to get the XA180 into the book, but it was cut out. I mean, Scott's just noticed the thing has just raised the thing I was going to bring up, which is, despite when we asked Battlefront when the VDV book came out about whether they were going to go for more wheeled artillery, non tank based artillery, and they said, well, no, not really. They've actually gone with quite a lot of that with the Finns. So you've got mortars, and I think there's some recordless rifles as well, isn't there?
Yes.
So
yes.
Hopefully, finally, they're going to start to see sense about how prevalent, particularly in armies that are either supplied by the Warsaw Pact or are Warsaw Pact, towed artillery and towed anti-tank was, because the 100mm Soviet anti-tank gun was still in service into the 80s.
Yep.
Towed 122s and towed 152s definitely still in service, particularly
we got rid of our last Soviet artillery guns just a few years ago and shipped them to Ukraine.
Yeah, I mean certainly the category C divisions, which are likely to have seen service in the far north, and Marines would have had a ton of towed stuff. So maybe we can keep our fingers crossed that if they ever get around to doing a Soviet Marine book.
Yeah, but I mean, I gotta say the mortars make a lot of sense with Finns, and maybe someday we'll get actually towed artillery. But I think Finland still has the largest artillery, at least in the Nordics, maybe even in Europe. And you can't really make, for example, if you want to make a Finnish infantry company, a Jaeger company, it's always got at least doesn't matter if it's a Marine Jaeger company or Army Jaeger company, it's always got an integrated light mortar platoon, so an 81mm mortar platoon with it, and the 120s, same thing.
Yeah.
And
it's the same with the Soviets with the BTR. If you run BTR infantry, it should have an integral 120mm towed mortar company.
Yeah.
And they just ignored it. It's on every single table of operational equipment that you can see for the Soviets in BTRs, and they just ignored it.
Frederick,
but
how about you guys? I know for a fact that the Swedish Army is also into mortars. Do you have the same thing, that basically any one infantry company has one integrated light mortar platoon, at least?
Yeah, I recall that, at least. We used to. Sure, now we're switching over to mechanized mortars with the CV90s. But I believe previously we have been using it a lot. And we've had a lot of mortars.
Yeah. And then
but we got the band cannon, but it's not the same.
No, that's good. That's a fun thing. Oh, but you know, they should have done the Finnish and Swedish band mortars. So you've got that small tracked tractor.
Yeah, the BV.
Made. Yeah, and so basically you've got the driver's compartment, which is one box, and then it's towing another tracked box, and you can either put a bunch of guys in it, or then, hey, how about you just plug a motor on it and drive around the forests?
We use them in the
or Bill.
Yeah.
So I was just going to ask Chris, he's gone, but I don't know if that's just because he's struggling with his connection. But,
no, I'm still here. Can you hear me?
Because the Danish camo scheme is not a million miles away from the British camo scheme. It's a black and dark green. You know, if you went with Centurions, that there is this talk of them doing this version called Checkpoint Charlie, which is Team Yankee, so like early war Team Yankee in the 1970s. And Centurions would mean, you know, if you bought Centurions for your Danes, you could then run them as a Checkpoint Charlie. They did confirm they were going to run it, but who knows when with Battlefront's production. But the camo scheme it's not quite the same. But black and green, you know, I know black and green for me will cover everything. But I know black and green for people of your quality in terms of painting would look very different to how I did it.
Yeah, but Richard, can you rule for the Danes? Do you have the PDF on your screen, your computer?
I can. Let me load it up. It might just slow my screen down. So if you want to talk amongst yourselves while I load it up.
Okay.
And just to say that the first time that the Centurions saw active service was in the Korean War. So I mean, they go back a long way. Let me find and then I can share the screen.
Yeah, so Rich, go ahead.
Even though it had a long service period, you know, when armies tend to buy equipment, they have something called in mind, like they have in mind something called a midlife update for the vehicle. So you don't buy a vehicle for like 10 years period, you buy it for 30 years. And then you have like a midlife update where you are able to, you know, upgrade sights, laser rangefinders, you know, night vision capability, thermal capability, and a different power pack for the engine, all that kind of stuff. So the same Centurions that they used in Korea wasn't the same that we had in Denmark, you know, in the 80s. It's been upgraded thoroughly. And then when we bought the Leopard 1 system, they didn't want to phase out the Centurion yet, so they kept them, and then slowly they were outphased. And I remember one of the old guys, one of the old corporals at work, he had been driving a Centurion, the guy we didn't know what all about with the knee, and then he also, you know, phased that one out, you know, adopted the Leopard 1, had them for like 25 years, and then also helped out incorporating the Leopard 2 tank. So basically,
yeah, I mean the gun changed, and I mean everybody, almost all the NATO armies moved to using the Royal Ordnance 105, the which eventually became the Centurion gun before we upgraded to the 120 in the Chieftain. But I think this in the Danish lists in the book, they've still got some of the old Chieftains armed with the 20-pounders, haven't they?
Yeah.
I've got it loaded up, guys, but I have a very old work computer, and it does take a while for it to load.
Otherwise, can you just can you tell me like the rule? Because I found as I recall, the rule was quite funny written.
Give me a sec.
Might be.
So Leo 1, here we go. The Danish Leo 1 has the L7 gun. Oh, yeah, sorry. And here we get to the Centurion. It's the same L7 gun. I'm not sure if you can.
I can't.
Because I remember seeing the same thing, that you could have you should have been able to downgrade them, but.
So what they've done is the tanks in the tank brigades are with the L7, and then it says that there are some independent anti-tank units which are using the old.
So the Centurion Tank Hunter Platoon.
Yeah, yes. I'm just going to share if I can remember how to do it, because it's been a while since I.
It's the OQF 20-pounder gun, an AT-17 firepower 2+.
Mm-hmm. But what I'm talking about is
I don't know if you can see that now, guys. I've put the screen. Let me move that down. So we're on the Danish. We're on the Danes, and yeah. So those are the old. I told you my machine was quite old. So those are the older Centurions with the 20-pounder, which was the original gun. Was updated in the 1950s, but they were originally armed with 20-pounders.
But I'm thinking about, like, there was this faction rule for the Danes, something it's like, is it in the beginning of the
okay, just 2 secs while I move back up, and you can just see how bad my machine is.
No worries.
You go, a lot of white screen. There we go. That's
there we have the Mercedes G.
Yeah, that's Søren's unit there.
Yeah, I'm actually going to make them for my Finns as well, because since there might be XA180s coming up at some point, I really want to do a Jaeger Company posse, as we call them in Finland. And the fourth vehicle of a Jaeger Company is sometimes it's a Mercedes G with a 40mm grenade launcher or grenade machine gun. Which
I apologize for the fact you can hear the Star Trek theme in the background. That's because my wife has got the television on really loud.
Don't worry, we can't hear it.
But the way they modeled the Geländewagens for the Danes, they actually should have made some that were open top, because
there we go.
It's a recon. Yeah, there it is.
There it is. So if you're using the older Centurion, because it has a ranging machine gun, you don't get the +1 to hit at range over. So it's the same rule that they had when they were in the Australian lists in Vietnam.
Yeah. Makes sense, yeah.
But you don't get the beehive round, which is pretty lethal in Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
And then bazooka skirts for the Leos. Did somebody ask what the Finnish special rule was?
Yeah.
Somebody and I'll just, while that's loading, because it'll take forever.
Yeah, one thing I forgot there that I saw with the Swedish force, both 103 and 104s are possible. They don't have so much support units inside the company, but instead they can have 2 infantry platoons. I don't think anyone else can have that.
The IDF can do a Makava company or a Magash company with 1 platoon, I think. At least 1 platoon, because I've run that list.
Yeah, because that makes some sense for me, as usually the Swedish tank companies used to integrate with the infantry.
Yeah.
So you have
same with the Finns.
Companies and 2 companies tanks.
Yeah.
So nothing special rules wise for the Finns.
Yeah.
Other than the fact that
we didn't even get Hunter. Okay, that would
you
have
get
been
ZSU
that-
57.2s, which I'm finally going to get something to use with because I've got them in a Vietnamese army, so that'll be fun. And then the Swedish special rules are obviously the ambush tank, which means that you stay onto ground when you shoot.
That's
which
really
I
A
think-
cool.
launch move, I think.
Yeah, so I think they have the effectively scout rule, which is if they move, they stay onto ground. But now they obviously add this new thing in, which is if you shoot, they stay onto ground too. So which is a good job because their front armor is not very good. So if you see them and hit them, they're going to go boom fairly quickly. But
So they're land-based hunter-killer helicopters.
yeah.
The thing is,
Yeah.
like, there was this big transition, like in the mid 60s, you know, starting with the Germans. They thought, like, there are three main things that you need for a tank. It is mobility, firepower, and protection. And if you want to have a tank that includes all of these things, it will be mediocre, at least. Nowadays, it's different with the main battle tanks because the technology is so good. But back then, in the 60s and 70s, you know, the Germans started by saying that, okay, we want speed and we want firepower because we're always going to lose the armor race against the guns because it's impossible to out-armor modern, you know, tanks. And that's also why it's obviously more armor in the front. So the things that the Swedes did with those tank hunters were the same thing, you know. We want them not to be able to spot us and then kill them fast and then have a lot of speed, you know, to run, pick up a new position rather than just slug it out because you will always lose that battle with trying to up-armor your vehicles to be able to take modern tanks.
So if they're stationary and shooting, you know, you're going to be hitting them on the balls to hit to begin with, aren't they? And then you're going to be hitting them on sixes, front armor. Where are we? Front armor 12. But it's a nice gun. It's gun 21. So 2 shots, hitting on 4s.
With the gun 21 anti-tank rating, you'll go through most stuff.
Yeah,
from
that's
the front.
command. That's the command.
Everything about the latest.
Yeah.
Challenger.
So well, the front armor 13 against heat. So so not bad at all. I'm going to stop sharing it because
it is like Christian told there that you have to. The Swedish tactic was to hit hard and hit fast because we can't win. We couldn't win. We still can't win a battle of attrition as we're a small nation. So you have to push out the enemy quickly.
Or make it as expensive as possible.
Yeah. But it's like in the 1700s with the Caroleans. We have like 10,000 Caroleans charging 20,000, but it just kept going. So the Russians just fled.
Yeah, but the Russians did that horrible thing of just drawing you into their country and waiting for winter and then smacking your ass out, didn't they?
Yeah. Now we went to Turkey and now we're paying for it.
I keep teasing Morton because Morton's running a Flames of War event based on the Battle of Narva, and I keep saying to him, I'm going to bring my pikemen and my charging Swedish cavalry, and you know, can we find a place for them? So Frederick was saying, look, you get with a Centurion company and the same with S tanks, you get the two platoons of rifles plus the armored recce platoon. And I think the S tanks are exactly the same, aren't they?
Yes, it's the same.
Yeah.
So not so much other support unit as they will be. Company support.
I don't think you would subordinate any other elements to a tank company other than infantry. At least in a battle line.
yeah, all the other stuff is non-core, so you can have the IKV 91s, all of the little drive you around bits, anti-aircraft.
The only thing you can't have is the recoilless Valpen.
Yeah, they're supporting the
no, that's the anti-tank.
No, yes, you can have them as guided weapons, but you can't have them as 90mm. They're specifically for the infantry company, aren't they?
Yes.
And I think
but then
the
you can have
chassis
control.
different. The chassis is a little different between the two, isn't it? So I don't know whether you can
RBS and PvPG. Or
yeah, I think there's something in it that says there's something in the narrative that says that because they were worried about the recoilless igniting the petrol, they redesigned the chassis slightly. So I wonder whether that's actually whether it's going to stop you sort of magnetizing the gun and the missile post and being able to swap them in and out. But I'll see. I mean, I've got them on order. So
yeah. No, I remember my friend's dad was in the home or the National Guard driving one of these recoilless. And he said they had to drive up on top of a hill, run out, load the gun and shoot and drive away in like 3 seconds or something. Otherwise they're done. They have to be fast. And they are fast and they have the scout rule and such. So and that's how they're using them.
The thing is also like if you look on the geographical position of Finland and Sweden, and also the way the land is looking with a lot of mountains and forested areas, it's easier for them to do a fighting withdrawal and utilizing the area and the terrain to their advantage. I know for a fact that you must correct me now, Frederick, but you used to have all of the planes were able to be stored inside mountains, and then you could use the motorways as airfields to take off. Whereas,
yeah, the not motorways. It's like just regular roads, but they're a little bit wider and straight, and you have both hangars to put away and pockets to drive the planes there, so you can have like an emergency airfield if needed. And there's still I think the Gripen can use them as well. I'm not sure.
Yeah. One thing that I actually just realized is that it's interesting that Finns didn't get the Drakens, because we had them in the period as well.
I
as
think
MiG-21s.
one new plastic plane kit is probably all you ever get.
I don't think it's plastic. I think it's resin.
Is it resin?
Yeah.
Mine are plastic because I bought them from some dodgy Russian company. So I shouldn't say that, really, should I? They're not great at bringing out new plane models. That's why I suspect why the Norwegians have got the Harrier and not the F-16. So there's a bit going on in the chat about towed artillery, and a few people saying. So Emil saying he's going to build Swedish Regiment P18 stationed on Gotland, but he needs towed artillery for that. Well, Scott, you'll just have to deal with my tab management. It works for me. So yeah, I think there's a view out there, I think which most of us share, which is that it would be quite good to start allowing towed artillery into the game, particularly with the Nordics and the Finns, where it's all there. So a lot of it is already made, and you could just reuse stuff that's already
especially
out there.
when all Finnish artillery units are trained to use direct fire against tanks when needed.
Yeah,
so unless a Finnish artillery unit has a fire mission coming, they will most likely have their guns trained straight forward instead of having them angled up. I'm not an artilleryman. You can, if there's a Finnish artilleryman, you can correct me. But from what I've seen in the past, is that they usually tended to keep the barrels horizontal. Yeah.
Chris, were you wanting
Richard,
to come in?
Quickly, question.
Ludi, you shut up and let Chris come in for a minute.
Sure, Christian.
No, I'm just thinking that like if they really want to portray like if you want to play a really historical type of scenario, especially with like the Scandinavian countries, we are not able to fend for ourselves for long durations of time. So if you really want to play a narrative game, you should at least make it so that you, I know that Sweden and Finland wasn't in the NATO pact, but guess what? They'll come and help them out. So it could be cool, like to use the all the Scandinavian countries at least as with an allied formation of some sort, if you want to play a narrative game, because
there's certainly the U.S. Marines were earmarked for use on in Northern Front. Although I'm not sure that the list for the U.S. Marines is really great, a real great reflection of the 1980s. It's a pity there's no British list, but I guess you could run the air mobile list as a kind of proxy for a British Marine list, because obviously British Marines were absolutely marked for rapid
Royal
response
Marines.
Into, so
Royal Marines would have been in Norway within hours.
Yeah.
But something that would have been really cool to make with the Danes at least is that back in 94, 95, there was this very famous Danish tank squadron that in ex-Yugoslavia helped out some Swedes, actually. They were manning this outpost, just observing and watching all the Croats, Serbs, and Bosniaks fight it out. But once in a while, when the other factions got bored, they harassed the Swedes under that particular outpost and were actually doing some kind of assault at one point. And the Danes have been, stationed nearby in Tuzla, where they drove out, show of force multiple times. But the Serbs back then didn't, respect that. So even though, despite the fact that they were actually deployed there as UN tanks, a very famous Colonel Müller, Lars Müller, he at one of these raids on the Swedish outpost, he said, "This is enough. I will commence Operation Bøllebank," which basically means Operation Clobbering Time. So he took out his entire squadron, and it's like I remember they are from my regiment, and those guys, they drove out with an entire squadron and actually fought against Serbs with Soviet equipment, especially I think it's and also a lot of RPGs and stuff. And they actually had tank-on-tank battle also with some T-64s and stuff. And each year on the annual date of this event, the old guys at work, that also the ones that are retired and veterans now, they meet at the local pub to remember that particular day. And I remember one of the guys there at work, he told me at one point they were driving out towards the outpost in all these Leopard 1 tanks, painted white with UN on the side, that the driver he saw on through the right periscope, he could see like a flash in the distance, and just pushed the brake, and a Stargate missile flew just across the road and didn't hit them, and then they just drove on. So if I were to make like a Danish force, if ever I wanted to make a Danish force, I would definitely paint them white as UN tank and make it like Yugoslavian.
I think I've seen on one of the Facebook groups, somebody's got a unit painted up as it might be a Finnish unit, I think, that's painted up UN with the with the blue UN on, and they were going to strip them back now that they can use them properly. And I'm like, that would be a shame, really, because It looked pretty cool with the white with the UN on. Luda, you were talking before I shut you up, so go on.
Yeah, no, I was just actually can't remember what I was going to say back then, but yeah, that UN unit idea sounds pretty nice, because I've been thinking about doing a UN force for a while, just because you could actually use pretty much any Western nation's equipment. It would also be a bit of a personal challenge making that UN white look interesting. Okay, having served on on one tour with the UN in the Middle East, that white paint is chipped off very quickly, and then you've got a bunch of the original camo underneath. So that could be pretty fun to do. But yeah, that it. Now that I think about it, would be, well, I've already been thinking about my Finnish force, and well, obviously I'm going to start with my original units, so a mechanized or motorized infantry company, using the BTR rules, maybe some other vehicle that might be coming up from a third party, but a Nordic battle group, which Frederick used to be in, and actually I trained a lot with your Finnish colleagues, and in 2015 actually deployed as part of the ex-NBG, which was later called something else. But yeah, it's a really hot book, to be honest. Do we have any questions?
No, I think mostly people are chatting amongst themselves. Auntie is saying, yeah, the Royal Marines and the US Marine Corps definitely destined for Norway for Northern Front. Everybody listing all the things that they would really like to have. No Drakens, no MiGs, no Hawks for the Finns. Scott saying tracked rapier would be great. A little bit of a debate about the Great Northern War going on, but
sorry to interrupt you, but the Hawks have always been in the Finnish Air Force as training planes. So it's when
you can put a rocket pod on them.
Yes, and a 30mm cannon. But the way if I've understood it correctly, is that when you start to become a pilot for the Finnish Air Force, you start of course with a propeller plane, and then at some point you graduate to fly the Hawks, and from the Hawks you would then go off to the actual fighter planes. So that would have been MiG-21s, Drakens. Now would be F-18s, and soon to be the F-35s.
Oh, you're getting them too, eh?
Yep. So now we don't need all the spare extra wide highways with weirdly huge parking lots next to a small gas station. We can just lift off.
Yeah, I mean, the Hawk has always been interesting in that it's often been criticised that the Brits have often been criticised for selling military equipment to countries that are not necessarily the top of the list that you should be selling stuff to. And we go, oh, it's just a trainer. And you go, well, yeah, but you can stick a 30mm cannon and a rocket pod on it, and it's not a trainer anymore. I think that sort of first jet trainer that you would go on is the Hawk. But I mean, people are chatting away in the chat, but it's largely so Auntie says, yeah, we got the rocket pods with them as well. So Emil's saying, I wonder why Sweden is left without mortars or with any secondary artillery. I mean, the answer is that Battlefront still a little bit, seems to be a little bit tentative about bringing towed artillery into the game in Team Yankee. I mean, when Team Yankee first came out, quite a long time ago now. So it was 2015. They were really absolutely, it was never going to happen. There weren't going to be gun teams. And then the first little break with that was the mortar teams that came with the Russian paras in the last book. And now we've got it in the Finnish with the Finns. I don't know why that there's a decision been taken not to apply them into the Swedish list. I wonder whether it's something to do with the information that was provided to Battlefront by Antti and others. And
No,
then have made a decision.
Yeah, I know for a fact. I mean, the old White Lion booklet that we had here in Finland had everything in it. So we had companies for every different an infantry company of every different type and so on. I would assume it's a flavor question, and since rule-wise the Finns and Swedes can very easily operate together, I think it's a simple choice of give the mortars to Finns, let the Swedes have all the cool tanks, and then you can combine a fluffy list. But I mean, I wouldn't say it would be that hard. Get a bunch of 120 or 81 mm mortars and I mean, the Finnish assault rifle looks very different from a G3 or an AK5, but you could do something. Sorry.
Too bad they were using AK4s.
Yeah, but yeah, AK4 is the G3, basically. So you could, I guess, if you could find any mortar guys and then try to model an AK4, so a G3 on the back of a mortarman, go ahead.
So, and for those of us that are slightly less bothered about stuff, you could probably get away with it. I have to admit that quite a lot of my Swedish infantry might be French people, on a day's trip to Stockholm, because I'm not sure I want to buy all the new infantry. Question in the chat on the YouTube page: do we think it's going to shake up the meta? And so I'll start, I think, because my worry with my Swedes is the same worry that I have with my French, which is it's a kind of naturally defensive army if you take the S tanks. So what are your reserves going to be because a unit of 3 S tanks is 15 points. So you're going to need to have 2 and a bit of those off table. And I find when I run my French, you can't really attack with French armored cars because they're front armored too. And if you try and defend with them, you end up with half your armor, almost, huge amounts of it off table. So it's never going to come on because you've got like 8 units of reserves. And I wonder if one of the issues for the Nordics, maybe not the Finns, if you're gonna try and defend, and maybe the answer is to take mech infantry and attack, as Frederick is going to do, because things are quite cheap. Unless you can get a small unit of Leos in from somewhere else, you're going to struggle with quite a lot of reserves. Which, if they start coming on turn 3, your game's going to be over before you get your army on the table.
Richard, if you look like at I think it was Kevin Morris that just won.
Yeah, he did French with Leos, didn't he?
No, I think he actually had Martyrs as his second allied formation, and then I think he played. Actually British mechanized infantry. So was like, as I said, like also historical wise, if you ally in something to support your forces, 1, it'll be game beneficial. 2, it will be very realistic in regards to what's going to be needed to defend our countries. So I think if it's messaging, maybe you will see Danes or whatever Nordic country used as an allied formation, and then have some of the bigger nations as your main focus. Yeah.
I think the Danes would work quite well with a unit of German Leos or a unit of British chieftains. Or,
and very
Chinese,
historical.
I guess now is the new meta, isn't it?
And if you
taking straight Swedes, where actually Finns are a more natural ally because they're easier to get. There's an easier cross-border route. I did think I was wondering how I was going to. I'm going to have all these iconic tanks, and I'm going to have to worry about how I attack with them because if I defend with them, they're just all going to be off the table. Don't know, Frederick. What did you think about that? I mean, you're going with mech, so is that partly because of that, and partly because you're an attacking player?
Both. I really like the S tank and the look and the uniqueness of it, and it's quite easy to get a okay force, but it's a more defensive force, both with slow. What is it now? Slow gun. Sorry for the rule. Slow shooting.
slow firing.
Slow firing.
Yeah, so they're they're overloaded, aren't they, as well? So if you're trying to move with the S tank, they're plus one to hit.
So you want them to defend with the ambush tank and the slow firing, but you don't want them to come into as reserves either. You already want them in place because, I mean, with delayed reserves, it's gonna be like 4 or 5 turns before they start doing something real business. So my plan was to do with I really like the mech with the small little jeeps, the Valpens, with the recoilless. That's one of the reasons I'm going with the mech. But I will probably, because you can have a tank platoon in it, the company, and in it I will probably do an S tank platoon, and then I have a 104 company besides that can be used as reserves. As they're more mobile, you can push where you need it to push.
Yeah.
Rudy, thoughts?
Well, with kind of the same idea as Frederick, I'd go with mechanized or motorized infantry, kind of like plugging all the gaps, slowing down the enemy. Why not take allied tanks from some other nation? And if I really want to model something purely as the Finns, I would go for a so-called later 90s, mid-90s force. I would, if I absolutely want to play so-called only Finnish army, get a bunch of Leo 2s from the West Germans and paint them up as Finnish Leo 2s, and there's my reserve. If I need to do a competitive thing, if hard to say, I haven't properly thought about a list yet for the Finns, since I'm lazy and I'm waiting for the Finnish force to go on forces. But I would go with like as already said, Finns have a medium bay, an anti-tank asset, 2 anti-tank assets on a medium base. So either the toes or something we call the musti. So an anti-tank recoilless gun, which the old anti-tank company guys love to run around with in a forest, pulling it everywhere. I would just fill up the forest with all kinds of AT assets and wait for the tank to come in for the counter push when I do a defensive list. Not sure how I would do an attacking list, to be honest. Maybe if just using, let's say, vanilla Finnish book assets, T-72s, a bunch of them. I wouldn't, probably won't go for the T-55s. They're a bit of a pushover. So T-72s, and of course infantry to go with them.
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll see. I mean, I played in it. I don't play I don't play much. Played competitively down in Cardiff at the European teams, and there wasn't anything from the new VDV book. You know, it was all still big blobs of Iraqis and big blobs of Warsaw Pact. And the two most successful armies were Johnny was using Czechs, and I was using not VDV, but air mobile stuff with maximum aircraft and maximum Heinz. So it's difficult to see whether VDV has changed the meta a little bit with the new book. There is a competition this weekend, I think, in Cardiff, European Open, I think. So it'll be interesting to see what the lists are. I think I'm giving anything away the day before the tournament to say that Johnny's taking the same list that he took last time. So it's a big blob of Czech infantry. But I think it's going to. I think what it will do is add. It might not change the meta completely, but I think what it will do is add some interesting allies to existing formations of, you know, I've looked at trying to get a Dutch, a very small unit, a Dutch Leos, just to give me that 40 point, 50 point off table thing. So I think that it'll be quite interesting, and you know, it's always nice to see new stuff. Actually, I did say I wasn't going to buy any more Team Yankee stuff, and then I ended up buying a load of. I know. I always say I'm never going to buy anything else, and I just end up buying a load of new stuff.
Carly,
I guess.
That again?
I guess we're all guilty of again buying. I'm not going to invest too much into this new book or whatever, and then 2 weeks later you got like, where will I put all this stuff?
Well, all I can say in my defense is I have not bought anything new for my ETC army. And
I'm saying to Richard's wife, Carly, it's not the truth. It's not the truth. Don't believe me.
Shush. She doesn't know that I've now got stuff stacked 3 deep in boxes.
Yeah.
She just thinks it's the same number of boxes. She doesn't realize that every box is now holding 3 times as much stuff.
Exactly.
Cool. Well, look, guys, we've done nearly an hour and a half, and it's always good to chat with Luda and Christine. It's really nice to meet you, Frederick. Hopefully, we catch up again at some point. I mean, we try and open these out as wide as we can. So I will see you two in about a month in Hasselt. I'm really looking forward to catching up in person. And Frederick, I'll see you next on a vlog or maybe at a competition if you ever get to a competition anywhere. Have a great weekend, and
you as well.
I'll tidy up the post edit, and we'll have a think about what we're going to chat about next. But I hope that's given you some food for thought about what we're thinking about doing with the new book. So have a good weekend, everybody. Cheers, guys.
Stay safe.
Cheers.